Hey guys, this is Mark, and I got a quick message to the neurotypical wives out there who think they may be suffering from Cassandra syndrome. If you truly do have Cassandra syndrome, then the reason you have that is because you have been operating in the sympathetic nervous system mode more often than the parasympathetic nervous system mode. We have this thing called the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for fight, flight, or freeze. And when that's operating, you're under the influence of cortisol and adrenaline. When you're in the parasympathetic nervous system mode, you're in rest and digest and repair. And instead of being under the influence of stress chemicals, you're under the influence of a calming chemical called acetylcholine. So if you have Cassandra syndrome, and if you feel like you're having some mental health issues and now some physical health issues, it's because most of the waking day, you are in some level of fight, flight, or freeze. And so with the Cassandra syndrome recovery group that I conduct, and the link will be below this video in the comment section and in the description area, we will be looking at ways for you to effectively spend most of your waking time, which depends on how much you sleep. If you have Cassandra syndrome, you're probably not sleeping very well, so you may be awake 16, 17, 18 hours a day. We want you to be operating mostly in the parasympathetic nervous system mode during those waking hours, and also to improve your sleep. So I will be engaging in some cognitive behavioral therapeutic techniques, cognitive restructuring, and self-care strategies such that you can be mostly under the influence of acetylcholine rather than cortisol and adrenaline, which now that frees up a bunch of energy for your body to rest, digest, and repair. You got to spend more time in repair than in fight. And that's not going to get accomplished if you're always under the influence of the sympathetic nervous system. Hope that makes sense. Links below. Join the Cassandra Syndrome Recovery Group.
Hey guys, this is Mark Hutten with AdultAspergersChat.com. Received this email recently from a neurotypical or NT wife, and she states, I'm married to a man with Asperger's, 17 years, and I think that I may be suffering from Cassandra syndrome. Have you heard of this? Is this common for NT wives who are married to an emotionally unavailable or abusive husband with Asperger's? Well, I have heard of Cassandra syndrome. It's not something that is in the DSM-5 or the Diagnostic Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, the most recent edition anyway. But Cassandra syndrome is basically the neurotypical or NT spouse's experience of emotional suffering that results from distressing interpersonal relations with a spouse who does not understand, empathize with, or validate the NT's pain and sorrow that may go hand in hand with trying to deal with a husband who is wired differently. Many NT partners are negatively affected by a number of Asperger's traits. For example, lack of empathy, mind blindness, alexithymia, and several others, and I've mentioned all of these traits in detail on other videos. But over time, the NT spouse may begin to feel isolated and invalidated, and in some cases even held hostage in their own home. A common phrase that I often hear from neurotypical wives that are in a marriage with an Asperger's husband is, I'm simply not important to my spouse. He prefers work or his special interest over spending time with me. The emotional distress felt by the NT spouse usually occurs when the Asperger's partner exhibits communication problems, has an inability to be intimate, is emotionally distant, or prefers to relate to the NT partner from a distance. The Asperger's partner often fails to realize that he must be intimate, vulnerable, and empathic in order to truly know and cooperate with his spouse. So, for good reasons, of course, the NT partner wants a deeper, more personal and satisfying relationship. And therefore, oftentimes, she does kind of push the Asperger's partner to step up and participate more fully in the marriage. Unfortunately, though, this pushing and pleading often results in further difficulties because the Asperger spouse now views the NT spouse as being increasingly bitchy, irrational, hysterical, whiny, demanding, and so on. Thus, the person with Asperger's distances himself even more, mostly for anxiety reduction. So, if you're wondering if you do have Cassandra syndrome, here's some of the symptoms. Avoidance of going places, for example, social events with the Asperger spouse because it always ends badly. Being easily irritated and angered. Difficulty sleeping and concentrating. Emotional numbness. Feelings of detachment or estrangement from others, intrusive, distressing recollections of past encounters with the Asperger spouse that were perceived as him being selfish, uncaring, and insensitive, markedly diminished interest or participation in previously enjoyed activities, persistent and distorted blame of self, persistent and exaggerated negative beliefs or expectations about oneself, persistent anxiety, anger, guilt, or shame, persistent inability to experience positive emotions, depression, suicidal ideation, and in many cases, severe resentment. But in any event, it's usually both a blessing and a relief when the NT partner learns about Asperger's and realizes that there actually is an explanation for the Asperger spouse's, quote, hurtful behaviors. In this way, the NT realizes that she's not crazy, it's not her fault, and that she may have indeed taken a lot of things personally that were in fact part of the disorder. So, if you are an NT spouse experiencing difficulties associated with Cassandra syndrome, just know that you're not alone. And this syndrome is indeed recognized in the literature. And you don't have to take my word for that, just do a Google search on it. So, in a nutshell, a relationship that results in Cassandra syndrome traits is one that lacks emotional reciprocity. That's really the key phrase right there, emotional reciprocity. That exists when partners provide empathic support to each other. It's a mutually beneficial relationship with balanced levels of give and take. But with Cassandra syndrome, one partner does most of the give with very little take in return. Also, as a side note, it's not uncommon for the NT spouse to feel lonely, anxious, and depressed because she has tried to tell others, like family members, friends, co-workers, or whoever, about the Asperger's related marriage difficulties, but oftentimes she receives little to no validation or empathy from other people, or worse yet, she may be viewed as melodramatic and whiny. And the reason for this is because the Asperger's partner often presents himself in quite a different light in the public eye. He appears normal, typical, kind, composed, social, and so on. But at home, honestly, he's quite a different person. And unfortunately, the neurotypical wife gets to see the ugly side of the Asperger's husband, and vice versa. It works both ways. Cassandra syndrome is in the literature, and according to many, it is a legitimate syndrome, and it was originally described in the literature as it relates to an Asperger's parent raising a child, and the child is neglected emotionally and all of the damage that can be done there. But then it got generalized into a spouse-to-spouse ordeal rather than a parent-to-child ordeal.
Hey guys, this is Mark, and I want to briefly summarize Cassandra syndrome as I see it. And this is what I run into when I'm dealing with people online in my groups. What happens originally is the NT wife is her ASD husband's special interest. When the romantic phase expires, he gravitates towards his original special interest. She starts feeling deprived and alone. And this goes on for several years and decades. And she starts having some emotional and physical health problems as a result of emotional deprivation. So there's that piece. Then the second piece to Cassandra syndrome is when she describes her dilemma to some close family members or close friends, they have a hard time believing her because let's say her name is Sally and the ASD husband's name is Jack. Well, Jack functions fine in all other areas of life. Walks fine, talks fine, looks fine, works fine. May be the smartest guy at work. Just a nice guy, And so they know Jack, and when Sally describes Jack as being, meltdownish and shutdownish and abusive and adult temper tantrums all the time, and he never gives me any give and take in conversation or affection and so on, some of those people look at Sally and go, wow, she's exaggerating. She's been very, very melodramatic. Maybe she's borderline personality disorder or histrionic. And they don't believe her because they know Jack, but they only see one side to Jack. They don't see the other side to Jack that Sally sees behind closed doors. So they don't believe her. So that's the second piece. We have the emotional deprivation piece, and then some people just don't believe that things are as bad as she is describing, which is terribly invalidating to her when she's trying to seek some outside moral support from close family members or close friends. So there it is in the summary. She kind of gets, she takes a hit times two, emotional deprivation, and people don't believe that that's really what's going on. Hi guys and ladies, this is Mark with adultaspergerschat.com and CassandraSyndromeRecovery.com. I basically never do a video where I'm just shooting for comments, but in this video here, that's the purpose. I'm trying to collect some data on two things really. What are some of your symptoms of Cassandra syndrome, and what, if anything, have you done to cope with that? I know coping is kind of second best to healing or actually getting attachment to your autistic spouse, but I'm interested in those two criterion. I want to do just a little bit of a informal statistical analysis, so to speak. So as many of you know, Cassandra syndrome is just basically an informal term for emotional deprivation. It's technically not in the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders yet, although they are contemplating that. But it's a real phenomenon nonetheless, and it results from not getting the emotional reciprocity, validation, give and take in conversation, affection, empathy, and so on from your significant other. That's the key term, the significant other. In other words, if you don't get these needs from that particular person, then you run the risk of having some psychological damage and some physical ailments, quite honestly. They go tandem. If there's elongated emotional problems, physical problems are not far behind. So this isn't faulting the autistic spouse at all, but I want to look at two things. If you would comment below and let me know what are some of the things that you're experiencing in all domains of life as a result of Cassandra syndrome. Different domains would be spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, even financially and vocationally. How has it impacted you? Secondarily, if you would comment below the video and let me know what have you done to cope or keep your head above water, so to speak, if anything. So I would really appreciate your comments, and in a week or so I'm going to do a second video where I'm going to collect this data and then present it in a little bit of an informal statistical analysis. So thank you in advance for your comments. I look forward to seeing them. I appreciate you. Thank you.
The work can't all fall on you. And you're never going to hear that sermon from me where you're supposed to do all the relationship work. You've been doing all the relationship work up till now. And I'm often hesitant to say you need to lower your expectations some, because she will often say, hell, I did that 8 years ago. I lowered my expectations a long, long time ago. That's over and done with. But if those lower expectations are not coupled with the paradigm shift, you're still going to be miserable. The paradigm shift is you move from someday he'll get it. Someday he'll want to try harder and he'll be able to do better and I'll be happy again. We just haven't found the right combination to that lock yet. Ladies, that lock doesn't exist. There is no lock. From that to some of these things, if not most of these things, that cause me the most grief or might be unfixable. And there's going to be a few of them that definitely will be unfixable. And I'm trying to make a cat bark. I've been trying to make that cat bark for years now. And I'm driving myself crazy And I've made myself sick, mentally and sometimes physically sick, desperate to get that cat to bark, and it won't bark. So how do I get it to bark? Not going to bark, ever. In the case where you don't feel like you're getting anywhere, this is going to be a hard one. If you're going to have the mindset that he has to behave a certain way and say certain things and do certain things, or I can't be happy, you have laid your own trap. If he has to behave a certain way and say and do certain things, or avoid saying and doing certain things in order for you to be happy, you have given him too much power. And you have laid your own trap. Why would you give him that much power? That's like laying a pile of money out on the road, not wrapped up in wrappers, just loose $100 bills on the road and praying to God that the wind doesn't blow it away. Why would you put yourself at risk like that? You have no doubt lost hope. So many times you wouldn't be here if you had lost hope. Your expectations largely did not get met. Your attempts at saving the relationship, I mean, you did the best that you knew how to do, and I'm not faulting you one bit. Your heart was in the right place. But your effort to get him back into the relationship and to be emotionally reciprocal largely went nowhere. And there might have been times where it looked like he's changed in 2 weeks or so. By God, I think we've turned a corner, just to realize on week 3, no, right back to square one again. And so you have had the thought, justifiably so, I'm not about to get my hopes up again because my heart can't stand another letdown. I'm just not going to do it. And so you almost, as self-preservation, again, totally understandable, you've hit a state of hopelessness just to keep, that was your version of trying not to get re-injured. Not a bad plan. But it might be a tool that worked to a degree for a while that might have outlived its usefulness. And it might even be at the root of your current misery, this hopelessness business. Many of you may have had the thought, something along the lines of, at least with this guy, I don't know how things could be any better. Or worse yet, I don't know how things can keep from deteriorating. Because in most cases, you have given it your best shot. You've tried a multitude of things. And you ended up here in this group, which is a sign that I'm getting nowhere other than making myself sick. And I'm not saying you're still stuck in the past, but we definitely want to, if you are, and probably at some level from time to time you still are, we've got to move forward. And so I want you to begin thinking about the business, begin the business of how can I have a vision for a better future. The opposite of that might be hopelessness. And this is where there is no vision for how things could be better. You had hope way back in the day with him, didn't you? You had hope, especially when you first realized, oh, there's this thing called Asperger's syndrome. Maybe there's things that can be done. And you tried everything that you knew to try. But if you're like most of the other NTs that I work with, your hope was dashed time and time and time again. And now you're at the point where I don't even want to get my hopes up again. Your hope was that you could have hope in him and trust in him, and he'd be your teammate and your soulmate and would be right there by your side and would be moral comfort for you when you needed it, affection when you needed it, and so on. But as you have found out with an autistic brain who's not necessarily very socially or emotionally intelligent, nor has much in the way of social and emotional needs, you realize that I honestly just cannot count on this person. So you want to stop giving him too much power. For example, he has to say or do certain things or I can't be happy. Or he has to live up to my expectations or I slip into a depression. Or he has to avoid saying or doing certain things or I feel like I'm less of a person, or my self-esteem gets tanked. The bottom line is this: you can't count on him. And if the truth be known, you really can't count on anybody. Some people will move. Some people will die. Of course, you're glad you had the relationship with them while they were local and alive, but people come and go all the time. You cannot count on any one person to be there in a meaningful way for your entire lifespan. You can count on God if you're a person of faith, which I am. He's not going anywhere. As a species, we weren't hardwired, ladies, to hide or recoil or live in victim mode. We were designed, say by God, the universe, whatever term you want to use, to move forward and conquer. You have some doubt about that? Just look at your history books. As far back as there is recorded history, you will see incidents where the humans moved forward and conquered. That's why we're still here today. If we weren't hardwired that way, we wouldn't be here. So we are always shooting for growth. We're always shooting for expansion. We're always shooting for improvement. And you don't have to agree with it. It wouldn't matter, because it's in your DNA. What I just said, it's in your DNA anyway. Whether you agree with it or not doesn't change the fact that it's in there. You're responsible for finding meaning in your life. And now we've talked about hopelessness. It's where there's no vision for a future. We want to talk about hope. But before we talk about hope, you have to know that it's your job to find hope. It's your responsibility for finding your happiness, not his. If he has to do certain things in order for you to be happy, you can't live like that anymore. So hope is positive anticipation, which is having some sort of vision for a better future. We all have to have some idea of how things can be better tomorrow. Otherwise, there's really no reason to get out of bed. You have lived and breathed negative anticipation for too long. What's the next thing he's going to say or do that's going to hurt? We have to stop that destructive cycle of negative anticipation and replace it with positive anticipation. You need something to look forward to, kind of almost like a psychological carrot at the end of a stick. So, how many times have you replayed the movie in your head where he did you wrong? You have to stop playing that movie and replace it with a new movie, which is going to be entitled, we'll just call it My Vision for a Better Future. You can't find hope in just one person. In this case, him. That's putting all your eggs in one basket. That's very dangerous. It's giving him too much power. He has to say certain things in order for me to be happy. He has to do certain things in order for my self-esteem to be intact. He has to live up to my expectations, or it results in my depression. Or he has to avoid saying or doing certain things, or it damages me in some shape, form, or fashion. And you have, and I'm not faulting you, because you thought you married a golden retriever, but you married a lone wolf. Someone who is very independent, autonomous, low in social and emotional skills, low in social and emotional needs. So for you to make your happiness, joy, peace of mind, whatever, contingent upon what he says or does, that's like taking a pile of $100 bills, your hard-earned money, and putting it out there on the street, praying to God the wind doesn't blow it away. You can't put yourself at that kind of risk anymore. You can't count on him, can you? I'm not saying he's failed you 100% of the time. You can't bet on him to follow through. You wouldn't be here if he always followed through. And I'm not trying to trash him. He's probably a good guy. I would probably like him fine. He's probably smarter than me. And it's not just him. You honestly can't count on anybody, any one person. Now, there's some people that you feel like, they're pretty safe. They pretty much come through for me all the time. They're always there for moral support. So, but even those people might get sick and die. I'm not saying just when I say you can't count on anybody, I'm not saying that they're always going to let you down purposely. But I know I've adopted the philosophy a long time. I can't count on anybody because they might move, they might die. They might get sick. There's so many different things that can go wrong. You don't want to, at this point forward, don't put your eggs in one basket ever again. Unless you're a believer, which I am. Certainly can count on God. He's not going anywhere. He's not going to get sick. He's not going to move to Tahiti. He'll be around. So we want to find hope somewhere. And by the way, that's your job. You're hunting down hope is your responsibility. Happiness, finding happiness, your job. You need to realize that you have a lot of control. In spite of all the mess in this marriage, you have more control than you're actually giving yourself credit for. And you have the power to create a new future. Some of you may not believe that, but just because you don't believe it doesn't mean it's not the case. Going in circles is part of going through it. So you can envision a bunch of circles moving this way. And so some days there's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Some things you will never be able to let go of. Some things you will be able to let go of quickly. Some things you'll let go of completely, and then they'll come back later on. So it's not linear. If you get to acceptance in the grief cycle, depending on circumstances and what kind of bad day you might be having, you may bounce back to anger. Sometimes you may bounce back to denial. Sometimes you may stay stuck in bargaining. So it's definitely not linear. And so just be prepared to get a full spectrum of this. I may go to my grave and never fully let go of this. Or this other thing that I think I would never be able to let go of. For some reason, something clicked and I finally have let go of it. I thought I was over this. Clearly I'm not. I thought I wasn't over this. Clearly I am. So it's just going to be kind of a mixed bag. But the big message here is there is no rush and there's no wrong way to do it as long as you're doing it. It being staying in some version of recovery, using some component of the recovery process. It could be something as simple as just staying in touch with the ladies on the Facebook group. It could be something as simple as, well, maybe I need to process it a little more. You go get your journal. And because a lot of times writing, I would strongly recommend that you write too rather than type. Sometimes writing stuff when you're not really sure, you have a bunch of question marks. Sometimes just going in and doing just a bunch of free writing where I'm not going to monitor my thoughts. I'm just going to kind of let the pen go. Sometimes you'll find answers just through the process of writing. There's no rush in letting go of resentment. In a nutshell, the antidote to letting go of resentment is forgiveness. And forgiveness is just this. I'm going to catch myself replaying the past hurts in my head. I'm going to catch myself flashing back to past hurtful memories. And then instead of ruminating about it and playing that whole damn movie again, I'm going to catch it and go, okay, yep, I remember this hurtful thing that happened last year. And I'm not going to entertain that thought. I'm not going to jump into my seat at the movie theater, get my bag of popcorn, and play that whole damn movie again. It's not. So letting go of this resentment is simply, I'm not going to replay those old hurtful memories. I'm not ignoring them. They're going to pop in my head. And what was done is not okay. So it's not getting him off the hook or making excuses for him. It's simply, forgiveness is simply, when the thoughts of past hurts enter my head, I'm not going to sit there and wallow in it and ruminate and go over the whole thing. So forgiveness is for you, nothing to do with him.
Hey, this is Mark Hutten. Would you like to schedule a one-on-one Zoom call? Okay, it's so simple. Just look under any of my videos in the description area. Click on this Calendar link. Now you see my calendar. Pick your month, your day, anytime that's available. Enter your name and email address. Then you'll get a follow-up email with the Zoom link on the day and time that you picked. And voila, we will talk.